So, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the second day of the RI.Logistica. I'm Ute Gunzenheimer, the Head of External Relations and EU Project at the European Spallation Source, and I'm here together with my colleague Jürgen.
Yes, good morning, Ute, and good morning, speakers, moderator, and audience. Today, or this morning, we start out with touching upon a subject that is really challenging for the RIs, and that's the dealing with fragile and sensitive shipments. So this is going to be a very interesting session. And if it's of the same quality of yesterday, which I know it is, we will have a really good session. So good luck and take it away.
Yeah, thank you. So my name is David Mannes. I have the pleasure and honor to chair this session today. I'm from Paul Scherrer Institute, and today's session is session number 6, Handle with Care Fragile and Precious Arts. And in this session, we will address the risks and responsibilities of shipping and handling valuable, unique artifacts and how they are insured during this process. And we will hear from a museum, a research infrastructure, and an insurance company who are well versed in this area and the methods they have developed over time. So we will have 3 talks of 15 minutes each. And after that, we will have a panel discussion, including questions and answers from the audience. So feel free to ask questions in the Q&A on your Zoom. And I will then pose the questions after during this panel's discussion. In our first talk, we have a joint talk from Claire Pacheco, who is head of the new Aglaé facility at C2RMF Louvre Palace, and Marie Courcelot, who is the head of preventive conservation at C2RMF Louvre Palace. Title of their talk is Making the Study of Precious Arts Possible at Research Infrastructure. So with this, Claire, Marie, I give you the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. First of all, I would like to, oh, sorry, do you see my screen? Is it okay for everyone? Yep. Okay, so first of all, I want to thank the organizing committee for the kind invitation so that we can share our everyday life handling with care fragile and precious objects. We are privileged. And I will present very quickly C2RMF, which is dating from actually from the 30s, as the Louvre laboratory was inaugurated in 1931. In the 80s, in 1988, the decision was taken to dedicate a particle accelerator to the study of cultural heritage artifacts. And in 1995, in the premises of the Louvre Palace, the research lab of French museums, which is working actually for more than 1,200 French museums, not only for the Louvre, of course, but for all French museums in the premises of the Louvre Palace, around, I would say, the accelerator. So the center is divided into 4 departments. One is dedicated to restoration of objects. Another one is dedicated to archives and documentations. The department that Marie belongs to is preventive conservation, and she will explain what her job is. And the research departments that I belong to gathers many groups devoted to objects, paintings, but also to techniques such as dating or imaging, or the accelerator and other laboratory characterization techniques. We are actually giving access, and I will go back to this in a few minutes, to what we call fixed lab, which is European access to fix large-scale facilities within H2020 Hyperion HS program. Also to mobile laboratory techniques through the MoLab. And access is given to European teams also for archives, and in the future for the ERIS, which is the European Research Infrastructure for Heritage Science, the future ERIC that is under construction. We are trying to make DigiLab, so access to digital databases. So New Aglaé is a unique facility for combining different aspects. The first one is, of course, the strategic localization in a museum context. It's the only large-scale facility in such a context. Then it's dedicated, fully 100% dedicated to heritage science issues. We are also compiling for decades data on very well documented cultural heritage artifacts with very well-known geochronological context. So the databases are very rich and unique. Also, the BIMLAM development is specific to heritage science questions and the constraints of museum objects. The activity is divided in three main beam time, I would say. There is, of course, the instrument maintenance and development. We have what we call service devoted beam time, meaning that we are answering questions that are directly coming from the French museums. And then we have the research projects. They are evaluated by international peer review panel, and they can come from local researchers from C2RMF, but also from national institutions, CNRS, or universities, or museums and conservators, but also international researchers coming from all around Europe and the world. So we have different various case studies, I would say, at Aglaé. Some users come with samples, so it's the easiest way, meaning that they come with the samples when the run begins. There is no insurance needed for that. And during the run, they are stored in a cupboard or on the table. So there is not much trouble in samples. Then we have objects. They might come from French collections. Then transport is organized and insured by the owning institution. Generally, there is what we call nail-to-nail insurance that is currently taken. And of course, Le Louvre is an exception because we are sharing the same building. So there's no need of any insurance as it doesn't go away from the building. And we share by night the same security and safety system. Objects from European collections, transport is also organized and insured by the owning institution. The European Commission doesn't take in charge such expenses. And of course, we are very careful about that. The objects must be insured during the stay at C2RMF, because if there is any problem, we don't want, of course, insurance problem and diplomatic problems as we have objects from foreign collections. All the objects are stored in C2RMF storerooms, and small, very precious objects can be kept in a safe in one of the storerooms. During the run, the Aglaé staff is absolutely not allowed to touch the objects, except if the person in charge of them expressly asks for help. And we are also very aware of modification induced by the beam particle. So I will now let the floor to Marie, who will explain a little bit more what she takes care about when the object arrives, and so on.
Thank you, Claire. Unlike a museum, the work that's passed through the C2RMF don't belong to us. And they are the property of the public institution that entrust them to us for analysis or restoration. Some of the works that arrive at the center, particularly for restoration, may have suffered extensive damage, making them fragile when handled and requiring specific conservation conditions. However, the center must guarantee the same conservation and management conditions as a museum. These conditions are easier to implement because the center is located in the Louvre. This point is crucial on several levels because the number of the works that arrive each year is very large, between 2,000 to 3,000 items per year, and because the treatments that are carried out at the center involves numerous movements between the repositories, the laboratory areas, and the restoration workshops. For example, the large-scale restoration of Louis XV's desk at the Château de Versailles mobilized the registry department, resulting in more than 40 intern movements between the laboratory and the storerooms. Next, please. The major challenge is to manage the movement of works in order to ensure the traceability of the object and to secure the works throughout their movements. To this end, the management of the collection is handled by the registry department, which is made up of specifically trained staff located at the C2RMF free site. The C2RMF Works Register is a professional logistician preventer who anticipates, organizes, prepares, manages, and controls the flow of objects that's coming for analysis or study or restoration. He or she supervises and coordinates arrival and departure, as well as internal movements between the laboratory and the restoration workshops, ensuring administrative follow-up, condition reports of the works, and preventive the risk of infestation, mechanical risk, and climatic risks. These jobs require special skills. The movement of the works is a high risk operation requiring sensitivity of the materiality of the object, a good analysis of the situation, and a good knowledge of the handling and packaging of cultural property. The management of works guarantees this level of expertise in the service of the works entrusted to the C2RMF. Traceability is crucial in view of the large number of works movements within the center. So the main tool for us that serves as a workflow is OSCAR, the window with the museums address their request for the center for intervention, to the center. However, this tool was not specifically dedicated to the management of the works, which doesn't allow precise traceability of the works. So in order to improve this situation, the registry department is considering equipping itself with a tag or RFID for geolocation. Throughout the various stages of the work's life, from departure from the museum to arrival to the center, monitoring and control procedures are put in place. So upstream, we have insurance. It's essential, as Claire mentioned. During the transport, the works are transported by specialized transporters and escorted by a museum officer. On arrival, the work is taken in charge by the registry department, which draw up a condition report with the escort officer, which is co-signed. The aim is to identify any weaknesses observed in the work. This document serves both as a contractual basis in the event of a damage and to ensure the best possible handling, taking into account this degree of deterioration. Very often, the works that arrive for restoration are very fragile. Concerning the internal movement, the registry department makes and moves the works in material that are adapted and chemically compatible with the nature of the works, with crates, foam, cards, etc. Installation of the work for analysis, as Claire said before, in case of heavy, voluminous or fragile works, the registrar team installed the works in the spaces dedicated to the analysis by using the lifting tools and the adapted material. On an ongoing basis, the management team assesses all potential threats and manage the environmental conditions of the work in the same manner as a museum rules. So for us, it's a daily risk assessment. The monitoring of the conservation conditions of work is important both in terms of controlling the climatic condition and in fights against disasters or against agents of biological degradation and infestation. Concerning the climate monitoring, the mission of the registry department is to monitor the climate in the various restoration areas and the laboratory storeroom. Concerning the safeguard strategies for major risk, we have two documents. We have the emergency plan and the flood protection plan. Concerning the emergency plan from 2015, thanks to the close collaboration with the loose firefighter department, the registry department was able to draw up a plan to safeguard cultural property for the Paris site. So for us, this and for the works, this document is essential for firefighters when evacuating or protecting works in case of fire. So list of priority works are created and updated with each new arrival of works. The emergency plan is an integral part of the government's works and cover all CEDES-RMF services. In this context, real-scale exercises are carried out. So the last one took place in 2019 and allowed to train both staff of CEDES-RMF, but also professionals from different institutions. In order to test it in a new context, a fire simulation exercise is planned at the end of the year in the Aglaé space with Claire and another in the Versailles site. The proximity of the Seine makes the underground laboratory extremely vulnerable to the risk of flooding. And since 2015, the Preventive Conservation Department has drafted a flood prevention plan with the development of evacuation protocols and protections of work. I'll let you conclude, Claire.
Yes, in a nutshell, when we don't have, we know that all the research infrastructure don't have the chance, the luck, the privilege to have a department such as Mary's, who are professionals of handling and taking care about precious museum artifacts. So what are the important points to take into account for the safety of works in a laboratory, whatever it is? First is security safety issue. So a dedicated space, if not a safe deposit box, should be dedicated to store the objects. Then the environmental conditions must be controlled, especially risk must be assessed for climate and external factors. Then equipment has to be adapted. We are adapting the instruments to the objects, and we never adapt the objects to the instruments. That's the point. And of course, people who have to handle the works have to be trained, because there are some reflexes that are not always so easy. Sometimes it's a bit difficult when you want to touch an object with gloves, because you think it's going to, you don't want to damage it, and the professionals tell you, oh no, don't, no gloves, otherwise you might, the object might fall, it might slip and it might fall. So you never use gloves, for instance. So this is something that is not so easy. We have to be trained, and we, the scientists at C2RMF, we are trained regularly to handle the objects. So thank you for your attention. And if you have any questions, Marie and I are here to answer them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Claire, Marie. So we are still rather almost in time. Yeah, as I said before, we will gather all the questions and then we will have the questions later during the panel discussion. So the next talk will be from Loïc Bertrand. He's a senior researcher at the Université Paris-Saclay and PPSM at CNRS ENS Paris-Saclay. And his talk will be about the lessons learned from more than 10 years of studying heritage artifacts at Ipanema and Soleil. Bertrand, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everybody. I hope you can hear me well. I will present, I would say, a parallel situation to what has been greatly shown by Marie and Claire, which is, I would say, the opposite situation of, I think, probably one of the only heritage lab, if not the only at a large scale facility, which actually consists of what you can see here in the yellow box, a lab, and in particular one beamline, but also the use of many other beamlines at the Soleil synchrotron facility on the Paris-Saclay area. It is, as Claire has also explained, within the context of a, I would say, vivid ecosystem, both locally in the region and also in the context of the setting up of a proper research infrastructure joining several European countries and international partners. So as was discussed before, we have, in our case at Ipanema and Soleil, studied a large diversity of, I would say, mostly samples from artifacts, in some cases also objects. And you can see here a list. It's actually with a different mission, I would say, under the name Ancient Materials. We actually group a large variety of objects, both from cultural heritage, natural heritage, including archaeology and paleontology. The context is also specific in this and maybe of interest for the ESS operation, because we started the construction a few years ago. You can see the status of the building in January 2013, and the same for the instrumental facilities, meaning that we actually have the history of what we try to do in terms of programming the spaces, and starting from a new facility means that we had to go under the whole process of evaluating some of the risks and setting up procedures to work in an interdisciplinary manner with the corresponding responsibilities. So regarding the spaces, the construction project started in 2006, and the initial idea, which is still how the building operates now, was to build a building specifically designated for heritage studies. So the building is entirely devoted to the field. But of course, it's not only for objects, it's also for related instrumentation. And also, and I will explain that a little bit at the end of my talk, with a view to encourage interdisciplinary work in an environment which is mostly, I would say, a physics or a physical-chemistry environment. So for that, we were lucky that at that time, there was already a standard that was being worked on. I saw that some colleagues asked such questions in the chat. And actually, it was not the standard as it is now. It was an experimental standard, but still we used it as a basis for several aspects. Some were very important to us, such as how to design storage areas, how should the packing and unpacking areas work, the study rooms in particular related to packing and unpacking, outdoor-indoor connection, fire protection, fight against theft, pest management. I must say that the text, and even the current text, is not so precise, unfortunately. It has some difficulty in being applied because the vocabulary is not so consistent along the text, but still in our relationship to the building contractors, it was extremely useful. Another point that I should mention is that it's, I would say, mainly for storage facilities within cultural heritage institutions, and we had to take into account the connection with our scientific operations, which was not always trivial. Since there has been some more standards regarding transportation, regarding pest management, regarding indoor climate. And for sure, one area where it is extremely useful is for discussion with the construction, the architects and the construction companies, and during negotiation phases, the fact that these standards exist will probably be very helpful on the ground. Regarding the aspects of responsibilities, we decided to have some climatic control in terms of temperature and hygrometry, which was actually important for some samples, important for some objects, but also important for instrumentation at the end. This comes with a high cost and a lot of work during the definition of not only the equipment, but also the programs under which these conditions will be applied. And we had to ask a specific provider or a specific advisor to ask us in this task during construction. We worked on the access procedures. We are also on a reasonably, I would say, safe side, which is on the Soleil side, but we also had to define the access procedures to the building. We had to work on some aspect of safety regarding staff. Regarding the fact that we have precious objects, we were in a specific conditions which maybe ESS can also find, which is that we are a state lab. This is Ipanema is a state lab, but Soleil is a private non-profit organization. So we had to, in terms of legal aspect, that was not the most trivial thing. And we had to establish, with the help of a lawyer, looking also at private loan agreements, a precious sample form in order to accommodate those needs. And also keeping, I would say, similar processes that exposed before, where the object remains in the custody of the user in practice, of the user, meaning in that case, in relationship with the owner of the object. We also have some aspects regarding ownership of data, which I'm not going to develop here. Regarding the interdisciplinary work, we work to design the space in order to encourage conviviality, cooperation, and exchange. I will not detail that, but also on the practical modalities of funding and project management. We also decided that in our case, the most profitable work was to use long-term or exploratory project rather than service providing, and that was actually the main focus of that. The data analysis component was also felt very important, and all these aspects of management was actually detailed for the Ipanema infrastructure later on by some colleagues who exposed these particular choices in management books that I have put on the right-hand side. And a very significant part is also the competencies of the staff in terms of engaging with interdisciplinary specialists, but also ensuring their training and exchange of good practices within the heritage scientific community. What about what we observed in practice and how we operated? So regarding the aspects which I have shown before, it was mostly as we had expected. There were specific points, in particular, of course, in our case, because of the specificities of the synchrotrons, samples are far more frequent than objects, but samples also have their complexity and often important complexity, I would say, in particular regarding their possible alteration and how to register them and to register their changing state in time, which was something absolutely not trivial. In terms of interdisciplinarity, and that will be the few slides at the end of my presentation, I would like to underline that it was not only that we had to adapt our instruments to the needs, but that it's actually a very strong source of creativity. So developing instrumentations and methods for heritage systems actually inspire those new methods and analytical modalities. And I must say it's a bit outside of the logistics in itself, but here the humanities are proposing extraordinary efficient methods and reflexive approaches to develop this instrumentation and to detail the operation that we do. And that was a very fruitful and interesting aspect. I will take a few examples which relate really, I think, to what we have to discuss today. One aspect is radiation damage to heritage samples and objects, in which we have been very active for approximately 10 years. And we have developed it in several axes. And the most important aspect was maybe to understand or to realize that it was also part of the research activity in itself. So we now try to integrate the concepts and the prevention of damage within our research operation, to document it when it happens, because alteration of sample will happen within the process, meaning that we also are using a lot of comparative and test samples to prepare experiments before running the heritage samples. And we have developed it along several axes of research, as I've said, advocacy, literature, and also development of new protocols and instruments for mitigation and monitoring of radiation damage. Last, how do we have also refined the way a large-scale facility can work in cultural heritage. And we have detailed two types of projects that originate from the lab and hosted projects. We also observed that we had an interplay between applying methods to new objects or applying I would say new methodologies, and also the development of these methodologies. And the fact to develop in parallel those two was allowing us both, I would say, to have a constant interaction with the heritage communities, but also a strong motivation and a very good collective work atmosphere in the lab, because of the interest also not only on looking at new objects and answering questions, but also developing new methodologies. And the most important aspect on that regard was to develop what we've called hosted project, where actually we include everything which I have said before, and with the long-term commitment of the stay of a scientist or a group of scientists on site for a certain period at the facility, where they can benefit, I would say, both from the procedures I have shown, but also from the developments of new research and new methodologies. So with that, I would like to thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Loic. You were really in time, so very good. This leaves us more time later for the questions. Now, for the third talk, we have Gloria Roland, who is Fine Arts Technical Manager at CRC Saint-Honoré. And she will give us a talk with the title Ensuring Art on the Move. So we have now the third, let's say, point of view for this whole process. And Gloria, you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. Let me just share my screen now. Can you see it correctly?
No, not yet.
Oh, okay. Just a second. Okay, that should work now.
Yes.
Thank you. So thank you very much for the invitation from Logistica. This is really a great experience to be here with you and to hear the very interesting presentations that have been made before. So yes, for my part, I will talk about insurance of the fine art aspect and the transit in particular. Before starting on the full subject, I would just like to say a few words on actually the role of an insurance broker, because in this specialized insurance market, we are really key, I would say, in order to be the voice of the clients and the ears of the insurers, and to find the proper solutions for insuring correctly artworks, which, as you know, may be of diverse type and nature. So in our role at CSC Saint-Honoré, we work with very different fine art players. I have put a list on the presentation that you can read, but we work with fine art galleries, antiquaires, corporate collections, collectors, auction houses, artworks production companies, carrier and shippers, obviously, foundations, and so on, which have every of them different needs and different risks to be insured. So we have to understand as well the interaction between those players to be able also to advise them, obviously, on the proper way. We have the opportunity at CSC Saint-Honoré to be worldwide, so obviously it is key also to accompany our clients internationally in other countries. Regarding the fine art insurance market, I have put some key aspects there to understand how it is built today. So we have a lot of capacities actually in fine arts. Basically, we divide the capacities between two worlds, let's say the local ones, so really country oriented, and the London markets with mainly the Lloyd's markets, where actually insurance was born more than 300 centuries ago. So which is also one of the more major fine art insurance markets in that way. And we can count with more than $2 billion combined capacity overall. It is really key on the fine art insurance aspects that insurers we work with have global licenses, because as you know, fine arts will travel throughout the world. Nowadays, there are a lot of transits to Asia, for example, in China, obviously to US, where there is the main fine art markets. And we are also developing a lot to United Arab Emirates, for example, in Dubai with the Louvre there, for example. So Abu Dhabi, sorry. So yes, it's really important that we are able to work with insurers in the capacity to accompany and to provide insurance solutions in these markets as well. We have sort of three types of products, of insurance products in the fine art industry, which would be, for one part, the collections insured on a permanent basis for private collectors, for corporate collections such as banks, such as fashion brands, foundations, of course, and institutional for museums and other institutions. We have dedicated products for temporary exhibitions, which obviously have different aspects in the coverage and different needs, with the transit part, which is more important rather than for a collection. And we have also products designed for fine art professionals, which obviously there we have to consider a stock to be insured rather than a permanent collection. So that can be art galleries, but also artist studios. As insurers, we will look at the environment of the artworks and the way that it is used or stored and so on. So conditions can vary depending on whether the work is actually being produced for an artist, for example, or a production company. Whether the artwork is shown during an exhibition, so instead risk with visitors, general public looking at the artworks and the risks that are linked to it. If the artwork is in storage, we have also different analysis of the insurance needs, because there you have less control, let's say, on the state of preservation of the artwork. So you have to put in place different preventive aspects regarding the storage of the artwork. And obviously, when the artwork is in transit, we will have more risk of manipulations, movements, and so on. So the insurance product would adapt to each of these specific conditions. So the rest of the presentation will be more oriented to the transit risk, which is the subject of this session. But obviously, everything is more or less linked, and the prevention in general is very key. And we will see that, well, what we want to share then is how insurers can actually accompany the different phases of a transit for an artwork. So let's say the preparation of the artwork for the transit itself, and then the delivery and or the restitution to its owner. So the preparation of the artwork would be actually defined in the insurance aspect as a prevention. Why is it important to have specialist insurers accompanying the prevention of the artwork? I think that insurance is very key, and I think Marie and Claire also shared that aspect in their presentation. Insurance is very key to accompany the proper risk management of the transits, and insurers actually would put it as a priority that packing must be made in a professional manner and appropriate and adapted to the nature, characteristic, value, and transportation mode of the artwork. We will see that depending of the size of the artwork, the nature, the length of the travel, you can obviously opt for different type of transits, but any type would have its own risk, and insurers will assess those aspects. Whether an artwork is consigned to a third party or not, actually insurers will expect from the owner of the item to be able to control the way it is stored, it is displayed, it is transported, because of the reasonable care he would have to have regarding the artwork. So obviously there insurers can also provide some advice with the help of the broker to the insured to be able to protect better the artwork. And for that, we also ask condition reports prior and after each transport, which will able to track the preservation and the condition of the artwork before the transport, after the transport, in order to control the liabilities in case of damage, and to also handle the claim more easily in a smooth way. So as a specialized broker, we can check the procedures in place, we can advise the clients and help the clients and the insured putting the best prevention measures before anything happens, before the transit itself. The other reason we would obviously advise having a specialized insurance product is the coverage, which is the main, the objective of the owner of the artwork, the insured, which is to be correctly covered for the artwork in case of damage. So their insurance and specialist insurers will provide the protection where actually there would not be enough protection. So there would be a gap in the protection because, for example, in the case of a professional carrier and shipper, you would have to notice that, well, some of them provide actually ad valorem, what we call ad valorem value insurance. But in case that the professional shipper doesn't provide insurance to the owner of the item during the transport, they will actually a waiver of subrogation. What does it mean? It means that if anything happened during the transit to the item, which is not due to the fault of the professional, actually the work would not be covered on the basis of the property damage. So this is something that specialist insurance will provide, and the conditions will vary depending on whether the artwork is transported by road, by air, or by sea. So obviously the risks are different, and you can have also different conditions, whether there is, for example, an exclusive transport by road, is the work exclusively transported by air, and regarding sea transits, this is a most delicate part maybe, because obviously the risk of humidity for transport by sea and the fact that they are longer in general make the general risk of the activity more important. Insurers would also provide coverage for artwork being self-conveyed. For example, in the case of art galleries, it is very often the case. So the art dealer will take with him the artwork to send it to a restorer shop, for example, or to an art fair, or to a client for a viewing. And in that case, the insurance can provide actually a coverage. So it is something that another general contract would not do, for example. And in the case of the artworks being sent by courier, such as FedEx, UPS, and DHL, we have solution, but obviously with limited liability from the insurance perspective, because of the higher risk of breakage, for example, for fragile items, obviously, but most of the time the risk of loss, actually. So, but we have solutions for any of those type of transport. The other very key aspect, and which is the aim of the insurance, is claim handling. Actually, in an artwork journey, transit is the most delicate part because of the manipulations and the fact that during a transit, items can be manipulated by maybe 5 or 6 different players. And the claims happening during transits are the most frequently reported. So it is really key to, with the help of the broker and also with the consensus of the owner and the consignee, to define the basis of valuation. So there is no gray area in case of a claim, what would be taken into account by the insurers, what would be indemnified, and so on. The basis of valuation can be different regarding the nature of the artwork. Is the artwork, is there a possibility, to restore the artwork? Is it a unique piece? Is the artist live? Is there a specialized restorer, and so on? So basis of valuation can be on a restoration cost, for example, or material value, on a grid value. Let's say there is a consignment and the owner say, okay, the market value for the artwork is 10, so the insurance should cover 10 in case of a loss. Does the owner of the artwork has a choice to decide whether he wants the artwork to be restored or not, and so on? The basis of valuation is really key for all those aspects. A specialized product would also take into account all the consecutive fees around a claim. So there is not only the cost of repairing or restoring an artwork, but there is also all the transportation costs around it. So if you have a damaged artwork in France, for example, but the restorer is based in Germany, you have to send it to Germany with a specialized through a specialized carrier and shipper. Cost can be high. Maybe the restoration cannot happen before 2 weeks or 3. So there are further conservation costs to be taken into account, storage, and so on. So the insurance, specialized insurance products would include within the indemnity proposal, the indemnity price would include all those fees. And last but not least, specialized insurers must obviously know the fine art regulation, all the rules around the possibility of restoration, the ownership, the titles for artworks and so on, so the claim can be properly assessed and handled. So regarding transit insurance, just to go into a bit more detail regarding the product itself. So we have what we call the nail-to-nail product, in opposition maybe to the transit-only product. So nail-to-nail would say that the artwork is insured from the place of origin during the transit, during any incidental storage, the installation, the deinstallation, the exhibition, and the return transit. So actually, the artwork status and manipulation are controlled and are insured under the same insurance product, which is on an insurance perspective and on a claims handling perspective, in case of claim, the most secured way of insuring an artwork for an exhibition or a transit, for example, because you don't have, I mean, for the insured, sorry, you don't have the question of the liabilities and recourse. You are actually under control regarding your insurance. We find most of the time all risk policies in the fine art insurance market, as opposed to named risk policies. So all risk policies will mean that all accidental damages would be covered under the policy, except those expressly excluded. The exclusions in fine art insurance are very few nowadays, so they include wear and tear, damages caused by any process of reparation, and inherent mechanical damages most of the time for contemporary installations. Obviously, all risk policies could actually not really apply for outdoor items, which are at risk for vandalism, for example, for all the natural events such as rain and so on. So transit insurance, we have to say that obviously I talked about property damage until now, but all the carriers and shippers would have actually liability insurance, but we really don't advise, and it's for obvious reason, but we don't advise having only the recourse against the liability cover for the carrier and shipper, because, as you know, liability is a very long process. You have to prove negligence, and maybe you have to go also before judiciary recourse. So it's a really long process, and the property coverage would be the most efficient in terms of a cover. So with a proper prevention and a proper coverage being negotiated on time, we believe that it's the most efficient way to be covered in case of a claim. So regarding the main aspect of the transit insurance, as you can read, in light of the vulnerability of fine art claims, you have artworks with a really high value. There is a low frequency in artworks because of the prevention phase that it's taken by the insured and the reasonable care, but there is high intensity, and sometimes you have small damages which make an artwork non-restorable, and actually insurers will have to pay the full value of the artwork. So there is really a need for tailor-made solutions, and insurers in the capacity to pay for important claims. So we believe it's really part of the risk management from an insured perspective. In the case of a consignment, both the consignee and the consignor are liable for the security of the artwork, and it's really key to pay particular attention to the loan agreement beforehand to make sure that the insurance conditions are understood by any party and the responsibilities are taken properly before. So in case of a claim, there is no discussion and there is no gray area. As I said before, the basis of valuation is really the key aspect in the negotiation of an insurance contract, because it would define in advance how the owner of the artwork could be actually indemnified in case of a claim. So it is really important when there is a consignment that obviously the relationship between the different parties are protected, and the best way to do it is that there is a proper discussion in advance between the owner, between the consignee, and obviously the insurance parties. So if you ever want to have more details, obviously we are at your disposal. I leave the last slide on the screen, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Gloria. So, yeah, we are a little bit over time, but I think we can go now and start with the panel discussion. So everybody's back. We have now a few questions from the audience, and I will start at the beginning. So with questions to Claire and Marie, but perhaps we can also, if anybody else wants to join in the discussion, let's say, or has some comment to a certain question, I think it's also appropriate if he or she could then just also give the comment right away. So first question to Claire and Marie: what processes do you need to follow to be in compliance with the insured objects? That's a question from Anne-Charlotte Joubert.
I will try to answer, and Claire, do not hesitate to complete. I think for that, in all the museums of the world, with the development of temporary exhibitions, the borrowing museums must provide the lending museum with facility reports, which indicate the main conditions for the reception of the works during the stay of the artwork during the exhibition, like security, safety, conservation conditions, etc. And so for us, it's a bit the same thing. We have to ensure the conditions for the insured objects in condition close to those of the museums. So that's for us the process that we provide to the museums who let the artworks in the center. I don't know, Claire, if you want to complete, or Gloria, perhaps it's a question for you too.
So yeah, obviously the prevention aspect is really key from an insurance perspective. What actually insurers through the intermediary of the broker will do is to ask, maybe sometimes it's seen as a lot of questions, but yeah, we'll ask questions regarding the kind of transportation chosen, the name of the carriers and shipper, the location of origin, the destination, the way it is packed, and so on, because you have different parameters regarding packing items, depending obviously on the fragility of the items, but also the environments. So it would be the first step would be to have all the packing and transportation aspect to be really understood from an insurance perspective before we could provide solutions.
On a very practical point of view, for researchers who are asking for beam time for their research projects on museum artifacts, when they write the proposals, there is a special part dedicated to objects, so they can, before we have the insurance and so on, they describe precisely the objects, and we ask them, is there anything to take in charge, particularly for your objects? And sometimes we have fragile objects that are very, very fragile for climates, and it can it happened at the Aglaé facility that we had to postpone an experiment because we had awful hygrometry conditions in the experimental hall of the accelerator, and we were studying objects that were very fragile and sensitive to humidity. So we couldn't make the experiment, so we had to postpone the run in order to preserve the artifacts. So, but we knew in advance that these objects were very sensitive to humidity, and so we were days before, and thanks to Marie's department, we are working together on the climate conditions in the experimental room, because there are the storerooms, but also where the experiment is made. And it's very important that we do not, of course, we do not damage the objects when we are studying it. So, so we have to take care about that. So in advance, before we even have the insurance conditions and so on, defining climates and so on, we ask for, when the researchers are writing the proposals, if there are anything to take in consideration for us during the experiment itself.
Okay, thank you. So just one personal question. So you mentioned the proposals and so on. Is that was just something I was wondering. So one thing is of the time scale. So normally you have these proposals probably also, let's say, a couple of months in advance, half a year in advance. Is that a problem? So let's say for on one hand for the museum, or from that side, or is there never a time constraint? That was the one thing. And then the other thing is, so at least at our facilities, we have then, as soon as we have planned an experiment, we have let's say sort of time constraints, let's say. So we would not be as flexible as in pushing experiments back and forth, but you have already said that you would then, in case you have not the ideal hygrometric conditions, let's say, then also postpone experiments. How flexible are you in that case? But sorry, I had too many questions at once. But so let's start first with the time between the proposal and the planning and so on. If there are problems, or if it's okay for the museums or the external museums, I guess it's more difficult than for your own. But
well, there are two call for proposals at the European level, and it's the same for Soleil and the Aglaé facility within the Hyperion HS, and in the future the Eric Harris consortium. So twice a year. So the institutions, the museums, or researchers from any research institution know that they have only two calls a year, so they are prepared for that. And generally, the museums they know exactly the time of our schedules and so on. So museums are used to insurance to prepare in exhibitions and so on. So transport is not a problem. They know which conveyors they have to work with. So even internationally, so they are very, very used to that. So insurance, I think that one of the limiting points, one of an issue for us is more dealing with funding insurance and transport, because research projects, you can ask for beam time that is paid by the European Commission, but transport and insurance is at the charge of the owning institution. If you are the Rijksmuseum, if you are the British Museum, if you are the Louvre, there is no problem of money. If you are a small museum in Romania or in even in Germany, because we were facing this problem a few weeks ago. If you don't have the money to pay for the transport and the insurance, then the objects cannot come to your to the facility, even though scientifically it's very, very important and it's innovative and so on. So sometimes institutions renounce to projects because of that reason. But the time and so on is not a real problem. Of course, we are very privileged, because when the insurance asks for how will the objects be kept and so on, when you say it's inside the Louvre Palace, okay, no problem, because everybody knows that everything is under control. Mary's department is taking in charge the climate and so on. So everything is perfectly done. So we are privileged. So for us, it's not a real problem. Postponing experiments, it happens all the time, I would say. You have technical problems, you have this and that, and you have constraints of agenda from many sides. So I mean, this is our everyday life, I would say, in organizing things like that. What is the less comfortable for us is when we have a problem, whatever it is, when the objects are already there, because we know that it might be very difficult to have them back for another run. So we are trying to make things working properly. We cross fingers not to have technical problems on the machine when the objects are there, because we know that most of the time it's a one shot. We will have in a few months, we will have the glass stained windows of Notre Dame. We know that time is, we will have just one slot, not more. So if everything is not perfectly well done, hard luck.
If I may jump in, following what you've just mentioned, David, of course, on a large scale facility, the questions are a bit different, particularly when we are working on samples. But in order to, we still have this constraint, as you have mentioned, of the proposal, of the timing of submission. So there are different initiatives. One of them has been to, as I've said, develop this hosted project, which had some more flexibility, because we can, in that case, couple more what we would call in-house research projects with standard proposals, meaning that in particular for all the preliminary tests, we can make them in a more flexible manner. This is absolutely critical for us, because it means that once the real experiments take place, everything is already in place. I would say both the sample holder, the data processing procedure, everybody knows how to handle the objects. We know which area we are going to look for. So this may look very little, but actually this is very critical to take the most benefit of the samples being on site and the time being allocated. The other thing which is developing in both on Saclay, but also at other facilities, is either what we call long-term proposals, where we also have more flexibility in certain ways, or back proposals, where users will jointly apply for beam time and share in between the group the access to the facility, which is interesting in our case because it encourages collaboration between teams, and also because it gives more flexibility with respect to having the object on site at a particular time frame. So there are, as you've said, this is an important aspect in several regards.
Yeah, thank you, Bertrand. Loïc, sorry. So I think so. The time is progressing, so we will just jump to the next question. And now I will just take one, for Bertrand, for example, because so there was one. Are there specialized forwarders used for the transport of the objects? So I guess this is also for probably
Yeah, so I would say this is related a little bit to what was said before. In our case, and maybe this is something we might need to even explore more, we try to escape responsibility, meaning that the responsibility of these aspects remains to the user. So of course, there is those questions of condition assessment, but we having the users on site with this hosted project is also in a slightly different perspective, because the object is not transferred to us. The user is here with the object. If I may also, regarding the following question, oh, sorry, but I think the following question about processes that we have, with which we had to adapt for this reason was also slightly different. This question of transportation is probably less important when we are talking about samples, and the processes that we had to adapt were more on the other aspect that I have mentioned, in particular relating to what also Claire has mentioned about radiation damage, where we have worked a lot in the past years to improve those processes and to launch activities with specific working groups at the facility, and policy documents developed also with the International Atomic Agency, where we have set up a specific group. I think it would be interesting to have the ESS joining this group, or the teams here present discussing those aspects of radiation damage to art and archaeological paleontological objects. So yeah, so I just maybe wanted to add that to the following question.
Thank you, Loic. Yeah, so perhaps we can also discuss radiation damage, because that would also be something which I guess is really important. But just to have also one question for Gloria from the audience. So would research institutions benefit from signing a joint transportation insurance? So that's one question from the audience. But on the other hand, I just have a comment to that. Isn't that, haven't we said, or yeah, that's a different question perhaps. Is there any way, how is it insured? Is it everything with the owner, or is there also some, or to which extent also the research institution has a responsibility or has to take an insurance for that?
So yeah, regarding the responsibility, I think that obviously we need to look at what has been agreed beforehand between the owner, and Logistica, because it will depend. I want just to comment regarding Loic comment the fact that the user is on site or not. Obviously, on an insurance perspective, what it is important is to have control of the conservation measures, the security measures, and all those aspects. So I would say that in general, the responsibility would lay with the person in control of those aspects, so in possession of the artwork. For example, when you have loan agreements, usually the borrower of the artwork is in charge of the insurance aspect, but it is also because the owner is not necessarily on site to control this. So in order to prevent any liability conflict or any liability recourse from the owner, I would say that, yeah, it could be beneficiary to look at insuring the artworks, because in general, the cost of insurance is very low compared to the benefits it can offer. So yeah, I think it would be a good case study actually for insurance.
Okay, thank you, Gloria. Yeah, but so I don't know. So we don't have too much time left. So I don't know.
1 minute, David. Indeed. So you have 1 minute left for some closing remarks, please.
some closing remarks. So yes, so thank you everybody for this very nice talks, and yeah, I think we could also we have a lot more questions actually, and there would also be more time needed to discuss everything in detail. But yeah, so thank you again. So I think this is an important topic also for all of us, and it was good to see also the different aspects. Because we all know, or most of us only know our own perspective, let's say from my side, for the research institution side, but that we also see now how it looks like from the, let's say, museum side, even though that was also a little bit mixed, but also from the insurance side. So that was very important, I guess. Yeah, so with that, I'm now finished, and thank you
very much
for
indeed.
your attendance.
Yeah, thank you very much, everyone, for your contributions for this extremely precious presentation. So very much appreciated. We continue in 15 minutes at 10:30, and for all the participants, you can just stay in this link. You're muted anyway, but you can switch off the camera and then return, or you can reconnect to the link we sent you this morning. So we'll stay in the same conference room. Jürgen, what are we going to talk about in the next session, number 7?
So we will move from the fragile corner to the dangerous and hazardous goods corner. So that would be a different angle to sensitive goods, so to speak. And I would like to say thank you to all the panelists and to the moderator. This was really, really good and interesting. And Loak, I will come back to you in regards to the group of the radiation challenge, so to speak. But thank you very much. It was very, very nice. Very, very good.
So then time for a coffee, and see you back at 10:30. Thanks very much.